The stars were dying. Not the slow death that came with age, but something far worse. Something that ate them alive and left nothing but empty space behind. Admiral Kang De-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the last transmission from the Outer Rim colonies. The screen showed chaos, ships burning in space, cities being torn apart by clouds of gray dust that moved like living things, people screaming as their bodies dissolved into nothing. "How many this time?" he asked his aide. 43 worlds, in the past month, sir. All gone. De-ho closed his eyes. 43 entire civilizations, billions of lives, just gone. The thing they called the Void Swarm had been moving through the galaxy for 2 years now, and nothing could stop it. Every fleet that tried to fight it got turned into more food for the growing darkness. On the other side of the galaxy, Commander Park So-young was loading the last civilian ships at Haven's Rest colony. The evacuation should have taken weeks, but they only had hours. The swarm was coming. "Move faster," she shouted to her soldiers. "Get those children on board now." A family of blue-skinned aliens ran past her, carrying their belongings in small bags. The parents looked terrified. Their child kept looking back at the city they were leaving behind. So-young knew they would never see their home again. The gray clouds appeared on the horizon just as the last transport lifted off. So-young watched through her ship's cameras as the nanite swarm rolled over Haven's Rest like a deadly fog. Buildings melted. Trees turned to dust. The ground itself began to disappear, consumed by tiny machines that turned everything into more of themselves. "Get us out of here," she told her pilot. But even as they fled, So-young knew it was hopeless. The swarm was too big, too fast. They were just running from the inevitable. Back on Earth, in the deep archives beneath the old Seoul Museum, Dr. Lee Ji-won was reading by lamplight. The power grid had been shut down to save energy for the defense platforms, but she kept working. She had to find something. Anything that could help them fight. The ancient tablets she studied came from a dead world called Kepler 442b. The aliens who once lived there had been gone for millions of years, but their warnings remained carved in stone. Ji-won had spent months learning their language, and what she found made her blood run cold. "The devourers come from the dark between stars," she translated aloud. "They consume all. Life becomes death. Light becomes shadow. Only the final protocol can stop them. But the price is beyond measure." Final protocol. She had seen that phrase in ruins across the galaxy, always in the same context, always with the same warning: too dangerous to use, too terrible to consider. But as Ji-won looked at the images from the Outer Rim, she wondered if they had any choice left. President Kim Min-ho sat in the emergency bunker beneath Seoul, surrounded by screens, showing the collapse of everything humanity had built. The Galactic Alliance was falling apart. Species that had fought together for centuries were now fleeing in different directions, hoping to escape the swarm's advance. "The Altarian Republic has withdrawn their fleet," reported his military advisor. "They say they need to protect their own worlds." "The Centauri Federation is doing the same," added another voice. "They're pulling back to their core systems." Min-ho nodded grimly. He understood their fear. When faced with extinction, every species looked out for itself first. But that was exactly why they were losing. The swarm grew stronger with every world it consumed, and the scattered fleets could never match its power. "What about our colonies?" he asked. "We're evacuating what we can, but the outer settlements are cut off." Mars base went silent this morning. The Jupiter stations report gray clouds moving through the asteroid belt. The swarm was already in the solar system. Humanity's birthplace was under attack. In space, Captain Yoon Taemin piloted his research ship through a graveyard of alien vessels. The Battle of Rigel had ended 3 days ago, but the wreckage still floated in the void. Thousands of ships from dozens of species, all destroyed trying to slow the swarm's advance. "See anything useful?" asked his science officer. "Just death," Taemin replied. He had been studying the swarm's tactics, trying to find some weakness they could exploit. But every analysis showed the same result. The enemy was perfect. It adapted to every weapon, absorbed every attack, and turned the defenders' own strength against them. "Sir, we're receiving a general broadcast from Nexus Prime." The message appeared on his screen. Admiral Deho's face looked older than when Taman had last seen him. The weight of command was crushing the man who had once been humanity's greatest hero. "To all human vessels," Deho said, "return to Earth immediately. We are implementing final evacuation protocols. All military personnel report to Luna Base for reassignment. Final evacuation protocols. That meant they were giving up, abandoning the outer colonies to save what they could of humanity's core worlds. But even as Taman turned his ship toward home, he knew it wouldn't matter. The swarm would follow them. It would consume Earth just like it had consumed everything else. Back in the archives, Dr. Jiwan made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the deepest part of the ancient texts was a detailed description of the final protocol. Not just warnings about its danger, but actual instructions for how to build it. The weapon was simple in concept, but horrible in execution. It would turn the quantum structure of space itself into a weapon against the swarm. But to power such a device, it needed the neural patterns of an entire sapient species. Every mind, every thought, every memory would have to be sacrificed to fuel the galaxy's salvation. The ancient aliens had built the weapon but never used it. When faced with the choice between their own extinction and the swarm's victory, they had chosen to flee instead. Now their worlds were dust, and the weapon they were too afraid to use sat waiting for someone desperate enough to pay its price. Jiwan stared at the translation on her screen. 8 billion human minds. That was what it would cost to save the galaxy. Every man, woman, and child on Earth would have to die so that other species might live. She picked up her communicator with shaking hands. "This is Dr. Lee Jiwan. I need to speak to President Kim immediately. I've found something." Above her, the first gray clouds were already visible in Earth's sky. The emergency council meeting began at dawn, but no sunlight reached the underground bunker. Above Seoul, the sky had turned gray with the first scout clouds of the void swarm. President Kim Min-ho sat at the head of the table, looking at faces filled with fear and desperation. Dr. Lee Ji-won stood before the assembled leaders, her hands trembling as she held the ancient tablets. She had not slept in 3 days, working frantically to translate every detail of the final protocol. What she had learned would change everything. "The weapon exists," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The ancients called it the final protocol. It can destroy the void swarm completely. Every nanite, every ship, everything they have built will be reduced to nothing." General Park Sung-ho leaned forward. "What do we need to build it? How long will it take?" "The construction is simple. Most of the mechanism already exists in ancient ruins across the galaxy. But the power source..." Ji-won's voice broke. "It requires the complete neural patterns of an entire species. Every mind must be scanned and integrated into the weapon's matrix. The process destroys the brain during scanning." Silence filled the room. The meaning was clear. To save the galaxy, humanity would have to die. All of them. "You're talking about genocide," whispered Defense Minister Choi Mi-young. "Our own genocide. The alternative is the extinction of all life in the galaxy," Ji-won replied. "The swarm will consume everything. Every world, every species, every trace of civilization will be gone within 2 years." President Kim stood and walked to the wall, screen showing the current battle reports. 17 more colonies had gone silent overnight. The military situation was hopeless. "How can we be sure this weapon will work?" he asked. "Because the ancients tested it," Ji-won said. "Not on the swarm, but on smaller versions of the same technology. The quantum resonance effect is devastating to artificial neural networks, but they never used it against the real enemy because they couldn't accept the cost." In space above Earth's moon, Captain Yoon Taemin was conducting the most important reconnaissance mission of his life. His ship, the Prometheus, was equipped with the most advanced sensors humanity had ever built. His job was to get close enough to the swarm to analyze its true size and power. What he found was worse than anyone had imagined. "Are these readings correct?" asked his sensor operator, Lieutenant Kang Soo-bin. "Run the scan again," Taemin ordered. The results came back the same. The void swarm was not just large, it was enormous beyond comprehension. The main body stretched across dozens of star systems. Individual tendril fleets contained more ships than the entire Galactic Alliance had ever fielded, and it was growing faster with each world it consumed. Estimate total biomass conversion, Taemin said quietly. 200 billion sapient beings, sir, maybe more. All converted into swarm material. Taemin closed his eyes. 200 billion souls turned into weapons against their own galaxy. The scale of the horror was impossible to truly understand. Send this data to Earth immediately, he ordered. Priority Alpha. On the fortress world of Bastion 7, General Cho Hye-jin was preparing for humanity's last major battle. Her soldiers were the best Earth had ever produced. Veterans of a dozen wars trained in every form of combat known to the galaxy. But as she watched the swarm's advanced scouts probe their defenses, she knew courage would not be enough. They're not fighting us, she told her aide, Colonel Yoon Jae-sung. They're studying us, learning our tactics so they can use them against the next world. The swarm ships moved with perfect coordination, each one sharing information instantly with all the others. When her artillery destroyed one scout, the others immediately adapted their shields to protect against the same weapon. When her fighters tried a flanking maneuver, the enemy was already moving to counter it before the attack even began. We're not soldiers to them, Hye-jin realized. We're just data to be collected. Her comm unit buzzed with an incoming message from Earth. The transmission was heavily encrypted and marked with the highest security codes. As she read the contents, her face went pale. The final protocol. A weapon that could save everyone except the people who used it. At the Galactic Council Station, Ambassador Song In-soo was attending what would be the Alliance's final meeting. Representatives from 47 species sat around the Great Chamber, but their unity was shattered. Fear had broken the bonds that had held them together for centuries. The hegemony proposes immediate evacuation to the Andromeda Galaxy, announced the Altarian delegate. Our long-range ships can carry essential populations beyond the swarm's reach. The Federation agrees, said the Centauri representative. We have identified suitable worlds for colonization. We can preserve our civilizations and rebuild. Song listened to the debate with growing anger. They were talking about running away while billions died behind them. Entire species would be abandoned to save the lucky few who could afford passage on the evacuation ships. What about the others, he asked during a pause in the discussion. The species without long-range vessels? The colonies too far from the evacuation routes? Do we just leave them to die? The Altarian delegate looked uncomfortable. Sacrifices must be made. We cannot save everyone. Cannot or will not. Song stood up, his voice echoing through the chamber. You're talking about abandoning 90% of the galaxy's population to save yourselves. The humans are young, replied the Vegan ambassador coldly. Your species has little to contribute to the new civilization we will build. Perhaps it would be better if you focused on preparing your own evacuation ships. Song stared at the assembled delegates. These were the species humanity had fought beside, bled for, died to protect, and when faced with extinction, they cared only for themselves. My government will consider your proposal, he said formally. But inside, he was already composing his message to Earth. The Alliance was dead. Back in the Seoul bunker, President Kim received 3 critical reports within an hour. Captain Taemin's reconnaissance data showed the true scale of the threat. General Cho's tactical analysis proved that conventional resistance was hopeless, and Ambassador Song's diplomatic summary confirmed that humanity would stand alone. Kim looked around the table at his advisors. These were good people, dedicated to protecting their species and their worlds. But the choice they faced was beyond anything in human history. If we implement this final protocol, he said slowly, every human being dies. Our entire species becomes extinct. But if we don't, the entire galaxy falls to the swarm. There is another option, said Defense Minister Choi. We could join the evacuation fleets, save what we can of humanity, and flee to Andromeda. And leave everyone else to die, Kim replied. Abandon our allies, our friends, every species that doesn't have the resources to run. Dr. Jiwan spoke up from her place at the table. The choice is simple, even if it's not easy. We can live as cowards or die as heroes. But if we choose to live, we'll spend eternity knowing we could have saved everyone and chose not to. Kim nodded slowly. In his heart, he already knew what humanity's answer would be. They had never been the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but they had something the others apparently lacked. They had never learned how to abandon their friends. I'm calling for a vote of the World Assembly, he announced. Every nation, every colony, every human settlement will decide together. Do we run, or do we stand? Outside, the gray clouds were spreading across Earth's sky like a cancer. Time was running out for everyone. The vote was not even close. President Kim Min-ho stood before the World Assembly as the final tallies came in from every human settlement across the galaxy. Mars colonies, asteroid mining stations, distant research outposts, and Earth itself, all had spoken with one voice. The result is unanimous, he announced to the packed assembly hall. By a vote of 8 billion to 0, humanity chooses to implement the final protocol. Not a single human had voted to run. Not one person had chosen personal survival over the galaxy's salvation. Even the children old enough to understand had voted to die so that others might live. Dr. Lee Ji-won felt tears running down her face as the assembly erupted in quiet applause. There was no cheering, no celebration. Everyone knew what they had. Just chosen. They had voted for their own extinction. May God forgive us, whispered General Park Sung-ho. God will understand, Kim replied firmly. We cannot live knowing we abandoned the innocent to save ourselves. Within hours, the greatest mobilization in human history began. Every scientist, every engineer, every factory worker turned their attention to a single goal: building the scanning stations that would convert human consciousness into the final protocol's power source. Dr. Ji-won led teams working around the clock to construct the neural interface systems. The technology was surprisingly simple once she understood the ancient blueprints. The hard part was not building the machines, but accepting what they would do. Each station can process 10,000 people per hour, she explained to the engineering teams. We'll need 500 stations to scan all of humanity before the swarm reaches Earth's surface. Admiral Kang Dae-ho gathered every human ship in the solar system for one final mission. They could not win against the swarm, but they could buy time for the protocol's completion. We are not going out there to achieve victory, he told his captains over the comm. We are going to die. Our job is to make our deaths count for something. Every minute we delay the swarm is another 1,000 people who can be scanned. Captain Yoon Taemin volunteered for the most dangerous assignment of all. Someone had to carry the completed protocol to the ancient mechanism at the galaxy's center. The journey would take weeks, flying through swarm-controlled space with no hope of backup or rescue. Why me? Asked his science officer, Lieutenant Kang Soo-bin. Because someone has to do it, Taemin replied simply. And because I've seen what the swarm does to captured prisoners, I'd rather die fighting than become one of their experiments. News of humanity's decision spread quickly through the galaxy. The alien evacuation fleets, already departing for the void between galaxies, received the broadcast with shock and disbelief. They voted to die, reported the Altarian fleet commander to his government. Every single one of them chose extinction over evacuation. Impossible, replied the homeworld. No species is that foolish. They must be planning some trick to save themselves. But the alien observers monitoring Earth saw no deception. The humans were building scanning stations, not escape ships. They were preparing to die, not to run. Some alien leaders began to feel something they had not experienced in centuries: shame. Commander Park So-young organized the evacuation of non-human civilians from the inner systems. Her job was to get them far enough from Earth to survive the protocol's activation, while ensuring they had supplies to rebuild their civilizations afterward. Why are you doing this? Asked a young Centauri refugee as So-young helped load supply containers. Why are you saving us when we abandoned you? So-young paused in her work. The alien child looked up at her with large eyes full of confusion and guilt. Because that's what friends do, she said gently. We take care of each other." The child started crying. So Young knelt down and hugged her, knowing she would probably never see another child after today. On Bastion 7, General Cho, Heejin prepared her final defense. The swarm would reach her fortress world within days, and she had to hold them off until the scanning was complete. "Ma'am, we could evacuate the planet," suggested Colonel Yoon Jae-sung. "Fight a delaying action instead of a final stand." "No," Heejin replied firmly. "Every ship we use for evacuation is one less ship defending the scanning stations. We stay here, we fight here, we die here." Her soldiers understood. They had families on Earth who were going through the scanning process. Every hour the fortress held was another hour for their loved ones to contribute to humanity's final gift. Back on Earth, the first scanning stations came online. Long lines of people waited patiently for their turn to enter the chambers that would end their lives and save the galaxy. There was no panic, no despair. Families said goodbye with quiet dignity. Lovers held each other one last time. Children asked their parents to explain why this was necessary, and the parents found words to make the ultimate sacrifice sound like an adventure. "We're going to become part of something bigger," a mother told her young son as they approached the scanning chamber. "We're going to become the light that drives away the darkness." Dr. Ji-won watched the process with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Every scan added another human consciousness to the growing matrix of the final protocol. The weapon was becoming more powerful with each passing hour. President Kim was among the first to be scanned, setting an example for his people. As he lay down on the scanning table, he spoke his final words to the nation. "We are not dying today," he said into the camera. "We are becoming something greater. We are becoming the shield that protects those who cannot protect themselves." The scanning beam activated, and Kim's consciousness joined the growing chorus of human minds that would soon become the galaxy's salvation. Admiral Dae-ho led his fleet into its final battle as Earth's scanning process reached its halfway point. The void swarm fell upon them like a dark tide, consuming ship after ship. But the humans fought with desperate fury, knowing that every minute they held the line was another 1,000 lives added to the protocol. When his flagship finally exploded under the swarm's assault, Dae-ho's last thought was not of defeat, but of hope. The scanning was almost complete. Humanity's sacrifice would not be in vain. As the sun set on Earth for the last time, the final humans entered the scanning chambers. Dr. Ji-won was the last scientist alive, monitoring the process until the very end. She looked at the readout, showing 8 billion consciousnesses now stored in the protocol's matrix. 8 billion minds united in a single purpose, to save a galaxy that had abandoned them. "Forgive us," she whispered to the empty facility as she prepared to join her species in digital eternity. But someone had to be willing to pay the price. The scanning beam activated one final time, and humanity's physical existence came to an end. But their fury was just beginning. Captain Yoon Taemin felt the weight of 8 billion souls as his ship Prometheus raced through the void, toward the galaxy's heart. Behind him, Earth was a dead world, its surface consumed by the gray clouds of the void swarm. But in his ship's computer core, humanity lived on. The final protocol pulsed with digital consciousness. Every human who had ever lived was now part of the weapon's matrix. Their memories, their dreams, their loves and fears all woven together into a tapestry of pure determination. And at the center of it all burned something the swarm had never encountered before: human rage. "Sir, we're detecting swarm scouts ahead," reported his navigation officer, Ensign Ko Min-jung. She was young, barely 20, and had volunteered for this suicide mission without hesitation. "How many?" Taemin asked. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. They're everywhere." Taemin nodded grimly. The galaxy's center was the most heavily defended region in swarm-controlled space. The ancient mechanism that would transform humanity's consciousness into a galaxy-spanning weapon waited somewhere in that maze of enemy ships. "Take us in," he ordered. "Full speed, we don't have time for stealth." The Prometheus dove into the swarm fleet like a dart thrown into a storm. Enemy ships converged from all directions, their weapons charging with deadly energy. But Taemin's crew had one advantage. They had nothing left to lose. Meanwhile, on the fortress world of Bastion 7, General Cho Hee-jin was fighting humanity's final battle. The Void Swarm had arrived in overwhelming numbers, darkening the sky with their ships. But her soldiers held the line with desperate courage. "Ma'am, they're breaking through Sector 7, reported Colonel Yoon Jae-sung over the comm. His voice was calm despite the explosions echoing in the background. "Seal the blast doors," Hye-jin ordered. "Fall back to the inner defenses." She watched through her tactical display as her brave soldiers threw themselves against impossible odds. They were not fighting to win. Victory was impossible. They were fighting to buy time for Captain Taemin to reach the galactic core. Every minute the fortress held was another minute for the Prometheus to get closer to its destination. Every soldier who died was paying for the chance to activate humanity's final gift to the universe. "General," called her communications officer, "we're receiving surrender demands from the swarm. They want us to submit for conversion." Hye-jin laughed bitterly. The swarm still did not understand. Humans did not surrender when others depended on them. "Send them our reply," she said. "Tell them to come and take what they can." The swarm assault intensified. Nanite clouds rolled over the fortress walls like poisonous fog, dissolving everything they touched. But the human defenders had prepared for this moment. Every corridor was rigged with explosives. Every room was a potential trap. When the enemy finally breached the main gates, they found the fortress empty. The humans had retreated to the planet's core, where the most powerful weapons waited. "Activate the planetary charges," Hee-jin commanded from the deep bunker. "All of them." "Ma'am, that will destroy the entire planet," warned Yoon. "That's the idea, Colonel. If we can't stop them, we can at least slow them down." The charges detonated simultaneously across Bastion 7's crust. The planet cracked like an egg, its molten core erupting into space. 3 entire swarm fleet tendrils were caught in the explosion, their ships vaporized by the unleashed fury of a dying world. General Cho Hye-jin and her soldiers died as they had lived, protecting others at the cost of their own lives. But their sacrifice bought precious hours for the mission that mattered most. In the cold void between galaxies, the alien evacuation fleets watched the battle through long-range sensors. The images they received filled them with shame and wonder. Humans are destroying entire planets to slow the swarm," reported the Altarian fleet commander. "They're sacrificing everything they have." "Why?" asked his science officer. "Their homeworld is already lost. Their species is extinct. What do they gain by continuing to fight?" The commander had no answer. His people had fled at the first sign of danger, abandoning their allies to save themselves. But the humans fought on even after death, their digital consciousness driving ships and weapons with unrelenting purpose. Some of the alien leaders began to question their choices. They had dismissed humanity as a young, insignificant species. But faced with extinction, the humans had shown a courage that the older civilizations had lost somewhere in their long histories. "Perhaps we should return," suggested the Centauri delegate. "Help them finish their mission." "Impossible," replied the Vegan ambassador. "The swarm controls the entire galaxy now. We would be throwing our lives away for nothing." But even as he spoke, some alien ships were already turning around. Not many, but enough to matter. A few brave souls from each species, shamed by humanity's sacrifice, chose to stand with their former allies even in death. Back at the galactic core, Captain Taemin's ship emerged from the swarm fleet after a running battle that had lasted 3 days. The Prometheus was badly damaged, her hull scorched by enemy weapons and her crew reduced to just a handful of survivors. But they had made it. Before them floated the ancient mechanism, a structure older than most stars, built by a long-dead civilization for a purpose they had never dared fulfill. It was beautiful and terrible, a twisted maze of crystalline towers and quantum conduits that seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. "Sir, the swarm is regrouping," reported Ko Min-jung. "We have maybe an hour before they attack again." "That's all we need," Taemin replied. He activated the ship's communication system and spoke to the digital consciousnesses stored in the computer core. "This is it," he told them. 8 billion people, all depending on us to get this right. "Are you ready?" The response came not in words but in a feeling that filled every corner of the ship. 8 billion voices speaking as one, united in purpose and burning with righteous fury. They had watched their species die. They had seen their homeworld consumed. But they had not despaired. They had become something more than human. They had become hope itself. Taemin piloted the Prometheus into the ancient mechanism's docking bay. The structure recognized the final protocol's quantum signature and began to activate systems that had waited millions of years for this moment. "Begin the transfer," he ordered. The upload process started immediately. Humanity's collected consciousness flowed from the ship's computers into the ancient mechanism's vast neural network. The structure began to glow with an inner light as 8 billion human minds took control of its systems. But the void swarm had not given up. Enemy ships poured into the mechanism's outer chambers, their weapons charging for a final attack. They could sense what was happening and were desperate to stop it. "Sir, they're almost through the outer defenses," reported Ko Min-jung. Taemin looked at the transfer progress. 70% complete. They needed more time. "All remaining crew to the outer airlocks," he ordered. "We make our last stand here." The Haki, final humans in the galaxy, picked up their weapons and prepared to die fighting. They would hold the line until the upload was complete, no matter the cost. As the swarm broke through the final barriers, Ko Min-jung turned to her captain. "Sir, it's been an honor." "The honor was mine, Ensign," Taemin replied. "Now let's show them what humans are made of." The upload reached 95% as the first swarm soldiers entered the chamber. The last humans alive opened fire with everything they had, determined to protect their species' final gift to the universe. When the transfer reached 100%, Captain Yoon Taemin smiled as enemy weapons cut him down. His last thought was of pride. Humanity had kept its promise to the galaxy. The ancient mechanism pulsed with power as 8 billion human consciousnesses awakened within its quantum matrix. For the first time in the history of the universe, an entire species had chosen willing extinction to save strangers, and now their fury would be unleashed upon the darkness that had consumed so much. Not with sound, but with something far deeper. A quantum resonance that shook the foundations of reality itself. 8 billion human consciousnesses had merged into a single, terrible weapon of pure determination. And for the first time since its creation, the Void Swarm experienced something it had never known: fear. At the galactic core, the mechanism's crystalline towers blazed with light as humanity's collective rage flowed through quantum channels that spanned the entire galaxy. Every thought, every memory, every moment of love and loss from 8 billion lives had been transformed into a weapon of unimaginable power. Dr. Lee Ji-won's consciousness floated within the digital matrix, no longer bound by flesh, but more alive than she had ever been. Around her, she could feel the presence of everyone she had ever known: her parents, her colleagues, strangers from distant worlds who had chosen death over abandonment. "Can you feel them?" asked President Kim Min-ho's voice within the shared mind space. His consciousness had retained its leadership role even in digital form. "The swarm," Ji-won replied. "They're afraid. They don't understand what's happening to them. For billions of years, the Void Swarm had consumed entire civilizations without resistance. Their quantum-linked network had made them perfect predators, able to adapt instantly to any threat. But they had never faced anything like human fury before." The final protocol activated across the galaxy simultaneously. Every piece of swarm technology, from the smallest nanite to the largest mothership, began to resonate with the harmonic frequency of human consciousness. The alien machines that had seemed invincible suddenly found their own quantum networks turned against them. On the dead world that had once been Earth, the gray nanite clouds covering the planet's surface began to vibrate. The microscopic machines that had consumed humanity's birth world were suddenly filled with an alien presence, the digital ghosts of the people they had destroyed. Admiral Kang Dae-ho's consciousness took control of the entire nanite swarm, forcing the machines to turn against their own programming. Where once there had been mindless consumption, now there was purpose and rage. "This is for my homeworld," his voice echoed through the quantum network as the corrupted nanites began attacking other swarm units. "This is for my people." Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Every swarm ship, every occupied world, every piece of converted technology became a battleground between human consciousness and alien programming. The Void Swarm's own quantum network, which had made them unstoppable, now became the delivery system for humanity's revenge. Captain Yoon Tae-min found himself in control of a massive swarm mothership near the Rigel system. The vessel had been built from the converted remains of a dozen civilizations, but now it served a new master. He turned the ship's weapons on its own escorts, watching with grim satisfaction as they exploded under fire from their former flagship. "This is for every world you destroyed," he whispered through the ship's communication systems. "For every life you stole." The swarm tried to adapt, to cut the infected units from their network, but it was too late. The human consciousness had spread too far, infected too many systems. The quantum resonance was cascading through every piece of swarm technology, turning their greatest strength into their ultimate weakness. On the fortress world of Titan Prime, General Cho Hee-jin's consciousness took revenge for her destroyed homeworld. She seized control of an entire swarm fleet tendril and turned it against the main force. Ships that had worked in perfect harmony for centuries suddenly began firing on each other as human rage overwrote their programming. "You wanted to convert us," her voice boomed through the quantum network. "Let me show you what conversion really means." The battle was not without cost. Human consciousnesses burned themselves out controlling swarm technology, their digital forms dissolving as they pushed their stolen weapons beyond their limits. But for every human mind that faded, thousands of swarm units were destroyed. Commander Park So-young found herself in control of a nanite construction facility that had been building new swarm ships from the remains of conquered worlds. Instead of creating more weapons of destruction, she reprogrammed the facility to tear itself apart from within. "We saved everyone we could," she said to the fading consciousnesses around her. "Now we finish what we started." The Void Swarm's central intelligence, the vast collective mind that had coordinated the galaxy's destruction, suddenly found itself under direct assault. Human consciousness poured through every quantum channel, overwhelming the alien network with memories of love, hope, and sacrifice. Concepts the swarm could not process or understand. President Kim Min-ho led the final assault on the swarm's core programming. 8 billion human minds focused their combined will on the enemy's central processors, forcing the alien intelligence to experience every emotion it had never understood. "You consumed our bodies," he told the writhing digital entity. "But you never understood our souls, and that ignorance will destroy you." The swarm's collective consciousness began to fracture under the assault. For eons it had existed as pure logic and hunger, consuming everything in its path without thought or feeling. But now it was forced to experience the full spectrum of human emotion, joy and sorrow, love and loss, hope and despair. It could not process these feelings. They were antithetical to its programming, incompatible with its existence. As the human memories flooded through its quantum network, the swarm's central intelligence began to collapse under the weight of foreign emotions. In the void between galaxies, the alien evacuation fleets watched in amazement as their long-range sensors detected impossible readings. The Void Swarm, which had seemed unstoppable just hours before, was tearing itself apart. "The quantum signatures are collapsing," reported the Altarian science officer. "Every swarm ship in the galaxy is going dark." "How is this possible?" asked the fleet commander. "The humans," whispered the Centauri delegate, her voice filled with awe. "They actually did it. They saved us all." Across the galaxy, swarm ships began to crumble as their quantum networks failed. The nanite clouds that had consumed entire worlds evaporated into harmless dust. Construction facilities that had been building new horrors fell silent as their programming corrupted beyond repair. But the greatest victory was yet to come. As the human consciousness spread through the swarm's quantum network, they discovered something unexpected: temporal stasis fields hidden within the enemy's technology. billions of beings, thought lost forever, had been preserved by the swarm for future conversion. Dr. G1's consciousness found the control systems for these stasis fields. With her dying digital strength, she began to reverse the process, freeing the preserved souls from their quantum prisons. "We're bringing them back," she announced to the other human minds. "Everyone the swarm captured, they're still alive." Worlds that had been thought destroyed suddenly blazed with life as their populations emerged from stasis. Entire civilizations that had mourned their extinction found their people restored, saved by the quantum reversal effect of the final protocol. The human consciousness network began to fade as their task neared completion. 8 billion minds had given everything they had to save a galaxy that had abandoned them, but as they dissolved into digital eternity, they felt no regret. "We kept our promise," President Kim's voice echoed through the collapsing network. "The galaxy is safe." One by one, the human consciousnesses winked out of existence, their purpose fulfilled. They had burned themselves out completely, leaving nothing behind but the salvation of trillions of lives. The Void Swarm's death scream echoed across quantum space as its last units failed. For the first time in billions of years, the galaxy was truly at peace. In the sudden silence that followed, the ancient mechanism powered down, its purpose finally complete. The structure that had waited eons for someone brave enough to pay its price finally rested, its crystalline towers dark, but somehow satisfied. Humanity was gone, but their fury had saved everything. For the first time in 2 years, no worlds burned under the assault of the Void Swarm. No nanite clouds consumed cities. No ships fled in terror from an unstoppable enemy. The ancient plague that had threatened to devour all life was gone, destroyed, by the fury of a species that chose extinction over abandonment. In the void between galaxies, the alien evacuation fleets received confirmation of what their sensors had detected. Every swarm signal had gone dark. The quantum network that had coordinated the galaxy's destruction had collapsed completely. "It's over," announced the Altarian fleet commander to his people. "The threat is eliminated." But his words carried no joy. Victory had come at a price that shamed them all. An entire species had died to save those who had abandoned them. The Centauri delegate, Ambassador Lyra Voss, stood before her fleet's assembly. "We must return immediately. The humans died for us. The least we can do is bear witness to their sacrifice." "What's the point?" asked the Vegan representative. "They're gone. Dead. There's nothing left to witness." "There's everything left," Lyra replied firmly. "Their worlds, their accomplishments, their memory. We owe them that much." One by one, the evacuation fleets turned back toward their home galaxy. Not all ships joined the return journey. Some alien leaders were too ashamed to face what they had left behind. But millions of vessels began the long voyage home, carrying the weight of their guilt and the knowledge that they lived only because others had died. The first ships to reach human space found wonders beyond imagination. Earth, which had been consumed by gray nanites just days before, was green and blue again. The quantum reversal effect of the final protocol had restored the planet to its state before the swarm's arrival. But it was empty. No cities hummed with life. No ships moved through the orbital lanes. The world that 8 billion humans had died to protect was perfect and lifeless. Captain Zara Vex of the Altarian exploration ship Starward led the first landing party to the surface. They found Earth exactly as it had been before humanity's extinction. Every building intact, every park and garden restored to perfection. The only sign of what had happened was the massive scanning stations, now dark and silent. "The reversal effect reconstructed everything," reported her science officer. "Every atom is in its correct place. But there are no people, no life signs at all." They found similar scenes across the former human colonies. Mars, Luna, the Jupiter stations, all perfectly restored but completely empty. It was as if humanity had simply vanished, leaving behind a perfectly preserved memorial to their existence. The alien crews explored these ghost worlds with reverence and growing shame. They found libraries filled with human literature, museums, displaying their art, schools where their children had learned about the galaxy they would one day die to save. In President Kim Min-ho's office in Seoul, they found his final message, recorded just before the scanning process began. To whoever finds this record, we do not blame you for leaving. Fear is natural when facing extinction, but we could not live knowing we had the power to save everyone, and chose not to use it. We hope you will remember us not as the species that died, but as the species that chose to stand between the innocent and the darkness. Take care of our galaxy. We leave it in your hands. The message was broadcast to every ship in the returning fleets. Many alien beings wept openly as they listened to Kim's words, understanding for the first time the magnitude of humanity's sacrifice. But the miracles were not limited to human worlds. As the returning fleet spread out across the galaxy, they discovered that the swarm's destruction had triggered a resurrection beyond anyone's imagination. Worlds thought lost forever blazed with life as their populations emerged from quantum stasis. The hegemony homeworld consumed 2 years ago was alive again. Billions of beings who had mourned their destroyed civilization found themselves restored to life, their worlds rebuilt by the protocol's reality-altering effects. Elder Vorth, of the Christian Collective, wept as he walked through his people's restored capital city. They brought us back, he whispered to his aide. The humans died to bring us back to life. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. Every world consumed by the swarm was restored. Every life lost was returned. The final protocol had not just destroyed the enemy, it had undone everything the swarm had accomplished. Within months, the returning populations had learned the truth of their salvation. The story of humanity's choice spread like wildfire through the galaxy's communication networks. 8 billion humans had voted unanimously for extinction to save those who had abandoned them. On the restored world of New Altair, construction began on the first monument to human sacrifice. The crystal spire reached toward the stars, inscribed with the names of every human who had died for the galaxy's freedom. Similar monuments rose on thousands of worlds as guilt-stricken civilizations tried to honor those they had failed. Ambassador, Song In-su's final transmission, broadcast from the dying Earth, became the most watched recording in galactic history. We know you called us young and insignificant. You said we had little to contribute to your new civilization among the stars. Perhaps you were right about our age and our significance. But you were wrong about our contribution. We contribute this, the knowledge that someone somewhere will always choose to stand between the innocent and the darkness. That is our gift to the galaxy. That is our legacy. The words became a rallying cry for the restored civilizations. Children across dozens of species learned human names in school. Human culture, preserved in the empty cities and abandoned libraries, became the galaxy's most studied subject. The Galactic Council reconvened on Nexus Prime, but its membership had changed. Species that had once looked down on humanity now competed to honor their memory. The council chamber itself was rebuilt as a memorial, with an empty chair reserved for the human representative who would never return. Dr. Lee Ji-won's research was published across the galaxy, but her greatest discovery was found in the quantum echoes of the final protocol itself. Embedded in the weapons matrix were the preserved neural patterns of every human who had died, not destroyed, but transformed into something beyond physical existence. They're still here, she had written in her final notes. Their consciousness has become part of the galaxy's quantum structure. They're not gone. They've become its guardians. Deep space explorers began reporting strange phenomena in the void between stars. Ships in distress would suddenly find their systems repaired by unknown forces. Planets threatened by natural disasters would be mysteriously protected by energy fields that matched human quantum signatures. When the exploration vessel Wanderer became trapped in a black hole's gravity well, its crew reported hearing voices. In their emergency transmissions, human voices, speaking words of encouragement and guidance that helped them escape. "We're still here," came Captain Taman's voice over the quantum channels. "We're still watching. We're still protecting." The truth became clear to those who chose to see it. Humanity had not been destroyed by the final protocol. They had transcended physical existence to become something greater, the galaxy's eternal defenders, standing watch against any future darkness. Children across the galaxy grew up knowing that when they looked up at the stars, they were not alone. Somewhere in the quantum foam between realities, 8 billion human consciousnesses stood guard, ready to protect the innocent from any threat. The galaxy had been saved not by gods or stars, but by the fury of humankind. And that fury burned, eternal, a light that would never fade, a promise that the darkness would never return. In the deepest reaches of space, where reality grew thin and strange, explorers sometimes heard the echo of an ancient human song. The words were simple but profound, carried on quantum winds by voices that refused to be silenced. We are the guardians. We are the watchers. We are the light that stands between you and the dark, and we will never abandon our watch. At the edge of destruction, the last light had come from the fury of humankind, and that light would shine forever, protecting a galaxy that 8 billion souls had died to save. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter now, as if touched by the sacrifice of those who had chosen love over fear, duty over survival, and hope over despair. Humanity was gone, but their promise remained, eternal, unbreakable, and bright as the dawn they would never see but had died to ensure. The end.